I'm curious what your thoughts have been so far on Sean McClain and what he's brought to the table from an improvement standpoint and just what you've been able to see from him so far.
Yeah, I think the offensive improvements are probably the most significant. You know, he's added strength, which I think has obviously helped him offensively. We've always loved Sean's versatility, you know, his ability to play all over the infield, all over the outfield. Um, he's a kind of the Swiss Army knife, you know, the ability to play second base. He could be our everyday guy at second. He could be our everyday guy in center, right. I mean, he's very versatile, and we knew that when we recruited him. And it's just nice to have that. And speaking on the team as a whole, I love the versatility of him, Baez, Lampy, a few of those guys that I really feel like can bounce around the diamond and put together the most complete lineup offensively and defensively. But going back to Sean, you know, Jacob, you've gotten a chance to be around him a little bit. He's a firecracker, man. I mean, he plays hard. He gets after guys. He's not afraid to mix it up. You know, he's kind of that throwback old school player. And, you know, being one of three brothers and the way his family's raised him to just compete. And so I love that about Sean. I love the energy he brings. But the biggest development I've seen is the strength, which has improved his offensive profile, I think.
Michael.
Hey, I asked Tracy this same question, and I wanted to get your opinion on the difference in the athletes that come in straight out of high school and the difference in athletes that come in out of a junior college, and what are the things that stand out between the two?
Yeah, I think it varies on a lot of factors. You know, sometimes the guys out of a junior college have more bats under their belt. And so maybe you're getting a little bit more experience. You're getting a little older player, obviously. But I think, you know, if you look at areas that we've recruited, we've placed an emphasis on recruiting Southern California. We've placed an emphasis on recruiting Arizona. And there's really high level baseball in Southern California and Arizona. And so I think guys are getting a ton of reps both ways in terms of the athleticism. I think it's up to the individual. I think the biggest difference that we see is the experience factor, the age factor, and just the total number of games under a guy's belt.
Jeff Metcalf.
What has the recruiting been like during the COVID period? And also, what kind of bounce are you seeing in recruiting off what you guys were doing last season?
It's been interesting, Jeff. It's completely changed, kind of thrown the whole thing upside down, to be honest. When we first were shut down with recruiting, we kind of sat back and said, all right, let's only move on guys that we've seen multiple times. And as this thing's dragged on, obviously we can't do that because guys are going to make decisions at this time. So we've kind of pivoted a little bit. Originally, we slowed it way down, and now we've picked it back up. So it's, I think now more than ever, the relationships that you've developed with high school, junior college, travel coaches, and scouts, everybody, I think those relationships right now are as crucial as they've been, because I think as a staff, we've learned to trust our eyes. And without us being able to be on the road, we're able to see a lot of video, but you have to lean on some people that you trust. And so that's the nice thing with this staff. Obviously, you know, Skip's been doing it a long time, and JK's been doing it a long time, and I've been around for a little while. And so we've developed some really good relationships with some people that we trust. And because of that, you know, those are the people that we'll really lean on during this time when we're not allowed to be out there.
Jacob.
Just to build off of that a little bit, with the class you guys just brought in, a top 10 class according to Collegiate Baseball News, what went into building this class? Have they lived up to your expectations so far? What have been your observations of your current freshmen?
Yeah, I think it's obviously I really like the group. I think it's going to be one of those groups that over time you're going to look back and say, all right, that's a really good class. And you know, the way Baez, McLean, realistically, were getting limited reps last year. I could see a couple of freshmen this year getting limited reps and blossoming into really good players in the future. You know, I wasn't in the room when Skip was talking, but you know, Blake Pivaroff's a guy that I think has all the offensive upside in the world, and Jack Moss is a guy that I think is going to hit right away. But I think as you look at the group, I think it's a really good balance of now guys and projection guys. And so you know, the class that we just brought in, the nice thing about it is you have a couple transfers in there that are able to balance out and give some of those freshmen some time. And I think that really helps. In terms of has it lived up to expectations? To be honest, you know, at this point in the fall, we're still getting to know them, still figuring out what guys can do, but we think it's going to be a really good class, you know, over the course of the next few years.
Cole.
Hey, Ben, thanks for doing this. I just, going back to Jack Moss, I want you to talk about him just a little bit. How has he, really come in and impressed you and the rest of the coaching staff? And again, like, what do you see his impact possibly being as soon as springtime rolls around?
I'd say the thing that stands out the most with Jack is his maturity, his routine. A lot of the time we get guys that come in here and it's kind of starting from the ground. And Jack's done a great job at figuring out what works for him in order to get him ready to play. So he's developed a great routine offensively. He's an elite worker. He cares. He's the guy that's always one of the first in the cage and always asking for extra defensive reps. So that side of things, he's been really impressive. On the offensive side of things, I've noticed, or we recruited him to do this, but he has elite bat on ball skills. So I think he's a guy that has the potential to hit for a high average at a young age and hopefully grow into some power as well. I think he's got a chance to be an immediate impact bat, potential, DH every day type guy, depending on how things go. But he's definitely in the mix to get a lot of at bats right away. So it's a mature at bat with what I think will be a high contact rate.
Michael.
Hey, Coach, to piggyback too a little bit off of what you're saying about recruiting and the relationships, but obviously with a lot of coaches, and as you know, in your sport and different sports as well, saying, virtual tours having to be a little bit creative. I know it's tough not going out there and see them. And with the virtual stuff, I know not even being gimmicky, but what have you learned about yourself as a recruiter? I mean, because as coaches, we know you guys want to accept that there's a problem, you make an adjustment, there's challenges, you move on. But I mean, with obviously the pandemic and not getting to really go out, how do you feel that, like you said, I know you said the winning, but drummed up more interest, but what did you learn about yourself as a recruiter and getting, maybe more creative and getting to know some of these potential recruits?
Yeah, I think it's just changed. I mean, it's the same, you're trying to accomplish the same things in a different way. And so at the end of the day, it comes down to relationships. And do you have a strong relationship with the recruit? Are you able to develop that relationship, even if you're not able to look them in the eye in person, shake a hand? And so how do you make a recruit's parents feel comfortable in trusting that this is a good situation for them? And I don't think the in-person stuff in the recruiting process can be replicated, but I think we can do as well as we can through Zoom, through FaceTime, whatever avenues we can go about to hopefully build that relationship, build that trust on the front end. So what I've learned is, even though it's not the same, you can still accomplish that. And maybe it's more phone call, text, more video chats, whatever it needs to be to develop that trust and that relationship on the front end. But I still think you can do it. It's just never going to be the same.
Thanks, Coach.
Garrett.
How's it going, Ben? Tracy was mentioning earlier just that maybe one of the challenges for this team is just a little bit of the lack of maturity. But what have you seen so far just from some of the older transfers like a Connor Davis, Aubrey Major that are coming in? And is it maybe sort of difficult for them at first, you think, from an older transfer standpoint, having been at a different program, different clubhouse, and now coming into another clubhouse and environment that maybe has different kind of environment? But what have you seen so far from those two in the clubhouse?
Been great. I mean, I would say that Connor Davis has a chance to be one of our real leaders in this team. I mean, from a position player standpoint, like obviously Drew Swift, as we look at, who's the voice of the team right now, Drew is taken hold of that and rallies the guys. But I don't think Connor Davis is far behind, and that's a credit to him and his maturity. He's come in and I don't feel like he's missed a beat. So it's interesting because even as coaches, I've been with Skip a long time, and that's one of the things that's been really nice about coaching with JK is to learn how some people do it outside of here. And the same can be said with Connor and Aubrey, in terms of like, hey, what did you do routine wise that got you ready to play? What do you do throughout the week to get you ready for a weekend series? And so it's nice as a coach because we get to learn what's worked for some other people as well. But in terms of blending them with our team, I think the bigger challenge has been the lack of time that they've been able to be together outside of, our practice sessions, because we're pretty limited in terms of what they can do there. So I think guys have done a great job in terms of building those relationships, but it hasn't been the normal way of going about that. Obviously Connor's an older guy and Aubrey has a lot of at-bats and experience under his belt, but even Joe Lampe is a guy that comes in as a transfer that's been in a Division I program, that's been in a junior college and has some at-bats under his belt. I feel like those guys are really helping the younger guys come along.
Jacob.
I'm curious what your thoughts are on the improvements and kind of just the status overall of the pitching staff, because we've now heard from Tracy that is a unit that he feels like has improved and it's taken a long time to get there. So I'm curious what your thoughts are and then maybe your expectations for the unit as a whole.
Yeah, my thoughts are that JK has done a tremendous job of building a staff with a bunch of depth. And I think you see development in a lot of different ways. To me, it's not, I guess the best way to put this is I feel like a lot of the pitching staffs that I've been around, you have those few guys at the top, and then it's a somewhat significant drop off. And I feel like this staff, obviously we have some guys that have some starting experience, but I think JK has done a tremendous job on the developmental side of things to bring some of those guys that had smaller roles and build them up into guys that are really going to impact the club. And so expectations, JK would probably be a better person, but I think we have, in my opinion, I think we have a lot of capable, talented starters in the Pac-12. And the challenge for us will be kind of figuring out, all right, what's the best system, who's best in what spot against which team. If this guy starts this weekend, are we better off with a different guy starting the following weekend or setting that weekend rotation and just cruising with it? But I don't think you have the number of options we do if the development isn't taking place. And that's been fun to see. So,
Jeff.
Yeah, Ben, just to loop back around to my previous question, when you have the kind of draft success you had with Spencer and Alika and the others, what's the impact of that on recruiting?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't get to part two there, Jeff. I apologize. The biggest thing that I think it does is you can sit down with a recruit and you can say, all right, what are you making your decision based off of? And literally every player we recruit says, I want to go somewhere where I can develop. And the flip side for us is, okay, well, how do you show development? Because every single coach in the country is going to say, we develop. And for us, it's easy to say, look at this guy. Where was he drafted out of high school? Where was he valued by Major League Baseball? Now, where is he after 3 years at ASU? And obviously, when you have someone like Torque that goes from undrafted to the first overall pick, I don't know how you show development better than that. And So as you look at the group, obviously the draft success, it's a great thing for the program in a lot of ways, but it helps specific to recruiting, I feel like, in terms of selling, look, this is the proof of our development. We try and identify guys that have upside in recruiting, and we're confident in our ability to develop them as baseball players and people. And that's kind of been the way we've recruited, whether it be at Indiana, Washington, ASU. It's let's look at those guys that have been high level picks. Hunter, Torque, Marsh, they're the guys that we brought in that they were all upside guys that needed some development, and it's easy for us to sell that in recruiting now that cycle's come through.
Cole.
Hey, Coach. I mean, just kind of talking about, we've already kind of addressed, bringing in the transfers who have had D1 experience like Connor Davis, like Aubrey Major, but talk a little bit about like Kai Murphy, who has Pac-12 experience. He's coming in, he's already, seen, or had some experience against the conference. Do you see his impact being that much deeper, considering obviously being in the Pac-12 and everything?
Yeah, I guess I'd say in a goofy way, Kai Murphy has more ASU experience than anybody on this staff. He knows the program inside and out for a long time. And I think he embodies what we're looking for in terms of how he's going to play the game, how he's going to approach things. He didn't get into the conference season up there in Corvallis, but it helps. I'd be lying if I didn't say it helps. So I think, from our standpoint, we try and treat each guy as an individual, and Kai's unique path to get where he is lends itself to him being a guy that we are so excited to have in our program, because, what it means to him to wear Sun Devils across his chest is a lot. And, from our standpoint, he really does embody the style of play, how he goes about things, the professional manner, how much he cares. From our side of things, that is probably even more noticeable with Kai than any experience up in Corvallis.
Take our last couple of questions. Jacob.
Just to loop back for a second to the question about pitching, I'm curious if there was a moment for you where it was maybe one particular player that did something that made you kind of realize, like, wow, we have a whole lot of depth here, and like this is going to be a lot farther reaching in terms of like the talent that is spread across the team. Was there one moment that you kind of realized all of that?
No, it's been just over the course of the fall and the number of outings that guys have had. For me, a guy that came in without a bunch of acclaim, but I think has really blossomed under JK is Graham Osman. He's a guy that wasn't, the highest ranked kid or anything like that, but he came in and all of a sudden, his last outing, he was 89 to 91 mile an hour left-hander that can spin a breaking ball and drop in a changeup, and he's good and he's really good and has a chance to really impact our club. And it's just the number of guys like that, obviously those guys at the top with Coop and Boyd, Tolman and the Thornton, the guys that started a significant amount last year are going to get the headlines, but those guys right below them those are the guys that help you win a midweek game, that stretch you, the seventh and eighth inning setup guy to get to your closer. A lot of games are won and lost right there. Who can come in and with the bases loaded in the fifth and get a stop. And so I think there are a lot of options for those guys, that group of guys that can impact the game anytime. If a starter stumbles, that we have capable guys coming in that could go long relief for 4 or 5 innings. So I don't know, Jacob, that it necessarily is like a kind of an aha moment as much as it is just every time, Osman, Denny, Barnett takes the mound and there's real belief that, hey, this guy could be a Pac-12 starter. And, what a luxury for us that he's developed for a year and a half, and we have this guy as an option in the 6th inning.